Ever wonder how insurance companies, like, how do they know how risky we are? Like to calculate those premiums is kind of crazy. Well, get ready to dive into the world of actuarial assistants, the number wizards behind the curtain.
Aha. Number wizards. I like that. It's not magic, though. It's actually a super interesting blend of data analysis and assessing risk.
Right. And thankfully, we have this awesome RoleCatcher career guide to break it all down for us. When I first skimmed it, I was really struck by how actuarial assistants are kind of like detectives.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah, they're sifting through mountains of data trying to figure out like the probability of accidents,
Yeah.
injuries, property damage, you name it.
Yeah, and all that analysis has a direct impact on how insurance policies are created
Mhm.
and how they're priced, of course.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. The guide mentions like statistical analysis and risk management, big words, crucial skills apparently. So for someone like me who honestly barely scraped by in statistics, what does that actually look like on the job?
Okay, well, think of it this way. Every time you get a quote for, say, car insurance,
Right.
somewhere, there's an actuarial assistant who's helped determine those rates.
Yeah.
They're looking at your driving record, your age, what kind of car you drive, even where you live, and they're using all that information to predict how likely you are to, file a claim.
Wow. So it's like they're putting together this whole statistical profile for like every driver out there.
Exactly.
No wonder this career path is often described as stable, with some serious earning potential.
Oh, absolutely.
Although I did notice in the pros and cons section that it requires a real, genuine love for the analytical side of things.
Yeah, you gotta love numbers for this one. It really does. This isn't a career for people who get bored with data and analysis.
Mhm.
You need a certain level of dedication, intellectual curiosity to really thrive in this kind of role.
And speaking of thriving, the guide does a great job of laying out a clear career progression. Like it starts with the entry level actuarial intern.
Right.
And it sounds like they're doing a lot of like the groundwork,
Yeah.
assisting with data collection, learning the ropes of statistical models.
Exactly. It's like an apprenticeship almost. You're
That-
gradually given more responsibility
Yeah.
as you gain experience and knowledge.
Right.
And from there, you can climb the ladder, so to speak, moving from a junior actuarial assistant to an actuarial analyst, and then ultimately a senior actuarial analyst.
Yeah, and I thought it was super helpful that they included those real world examples just to show what each stage looks like in practice. Like they said, a junior actuarial assistant might be tasked with actually building databases,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
which sounds pretty important to me.
Absolutely. And then you have the senior analyst who might be leading entire projects, mentoring junior staff,
Wow.
that kind of thing. And as you move up that ladder, the guide emphasizes how important professional certifications are.
Yeah.
Things like the ASA, that's Associate of the Society of Actuaries, or the ERIRA, the Chartered Enterprise Risk Analyst.
Right, those are mouthful titles.
Yeah. But it seems like those credentials can really give your resume a boost, make you stand out.
They're like badges of honor, right, in the actuarial world. Proof that you've reached a certain level of like mastery.
Precisely. And that kind of leads us to an interesting question for you. What part of this career path is really speaking to you? Is it that problem-solving element, the potential for growth, or maybe something else entirely?
It's definitely a lot to think about. And the guide doesn't shy away from the challenges either, especially when it comes to actually landing your dream job in this field. I have to say, that interview prep section was pretty eye-opening. I mean, I get that you have to be good at math, but like some of the questions they're asking are unexpected.
Oh, absolutely. They really throw some curveballs in there. It's not just about crunching numbers.
Yeah.
They want to see that you can think critically, that you can communicate complex ideas effectively.
Right?
And importantly, even to someone who isn't exactly fluent in, well, spreadsheet speak, you could say.
Exactly. One question that really caught my eye was, what inspired you to pursue a career in actuarial science? I imagine it's easy to just default to like, oh, I like math.
Right.
But I have a feeling they're looking for something a bit deeper than that.
Oh, for sure. It's less about showcasing how much you love numbers and more about showing a genuine understanding of how those numbers translate into real-world impact.
Right. It's like that old saying, show, don't tell. Right. So instead of just saying, I love math, a more interesting answer might be something like, I've always been fascinated by the power of data to tell stories and to help us make better decisions.
Absolutely.
And actuarial science, to me, feels like the perfect blend of that analytical thinking and real-world problem solving.
That's a fantastic example. It really showcases both your passion and a clear understanding of what the field is about and, its impact.
Now, here's one that I bet trips a lot of people up.
Mm.
Can you describe a time when you had to explain a complex concept to someone outside of your field?
Ooh, yeah, that's a classic one. And it highlights a super crucial skill for actuarial assistance communication. Because it's one thing to understand the data, right? But it's another thing entirely to make that data clear and relevant to someone who doesn't have that same technical background.
It's like you have to be a translator almost between the world of data and the everyday world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that ability to bridge that gap, to take these complex concepts and make them understandable, even engaging, that's incredibly valuable.
So for anyone listening who's like prepping for an interview, maybe start practicing those storytelling skills now.
Yes.
Maybe think about a time when you had to explain something complicated to, like a friend or a family member. Heck, even a pet.
I love that.
Because after all, even the most brilliant insights are only as good as your ability to actually communicate them. Right.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, while we're on the topic of challenges, the guide also touches on, well, I guess you could say the elephant in the room, or maybe the algorithm in the cubicle. Okay. Technology. Specifically, how things like AI and machine learning are, shaking things up in the actuarial world. And I have to admit, I'm both excited and a little terrified by the idea of robots taking over our jobs one day.
It's a hot topic for sure in so many fields, not just this one. But instead of thinking of it as a, robot takeover, maybe think of it more like a powerful partnership.
Okay. I like that perspective.
Yeah.
So how are these technologies actually changing the game then?
Well, imagine like being able to analyze these massive, massive data sets, but with incredible speed and accuracy.
Right.
Spotting patterns and trends that would take, a team of humans like ages to uncover. That's the power of AI and machine learning right there.
So it's like having this superpowered assistant by your side, just crunching numbers at warp speed.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is important. While these technologies can definitely automate certain tasks and they can make predictions with incredible accuracy, by the way, they still rely on human expertise
Okay.
to interpret the results, to apply context, to make those, those judgment calls.
Oh, that's good to know. So it's less about robots replacing actuaries then, and more about like actuaries learning to use these tools to their advantage.
Precisely. The most successful actuarial assistants moving forward, they're going to be the ones who embrace these advancements.
Yes.
Who are constantly upskilling, adapting their approach as the technology changes, which it always is.
Yeah, it's like you have this superpower, but you have to learn how to control it and use it responsibly. Speaking of responsibility, I'm curious about the ethical considerations in this field.
Ooh, that's a really important point.
Because with great data
Right.
comes great responsibility or something like that.
Exactly.
But seriously, actuarial assistants, they're dealing with some pretty sensitive information, right?
They are.
And making decisions that impact people's lives.
Absolutely.
Like when you think about setting insurance premiums, it has to be profitable for the company,
Right.
but also fair to the customer.
It's a balance, for sure. And with, AI and machine learning becoming more prevalent, there are even more ethical questions to consider. Like, how do we make sure the algorithms themselves aren't biased? That they're not perpetuating, existing inequalities?
It's true. I hadn't even thought about that. It seems like this field requires not just a sharp analytical mind, but also like a strong ethical compass.
100%. Integrity and a commitment to fairness, those are non-negotiables for an actuarial assistant. They really are the guardians of data-driven decision-making.
That's a great way to put it. It really adds a whole other layer of complexity to this career path and responsibility. It's not just about being good at math, clearly.
Nope, not at all. It's about using those analytical skills to navigate this incredibly complex world of data and risk and, all those ethical dilemmas.
Speaking of navigating complexity, I gotta say, I was a bit overwhelmed by just the sheer number of software programs and tools that they mentioned in this guide.
Oh, yeah.
It's like actuarial assistants need to be fluent in a whole other language, a technology language.
It's true. It can feel like that, yeah. And the toolkit for this profession is constantly expanding, too. But at its core, it's all about using tech to manage data, to make sense of it all.
So for anyone listening who's maybe thinking about dipping their toes into this world, what are some of the must-know tools that they should familiarize themselves with?
Well, you've got your statistical software, like the heavy hitters, SAS, R.
Okay.
Those are your go-tos for, everything from just organizing data to building those complex predictive models we were talking about.
So it's like having this digital laboratory, basically, where you can like crunch the numbers and see what shakes out.
Exactly. Haha. And you can't forget about good old Excel. As much as we talk about fancy new software, a lot of the work still happens in those spreadsheets.
Right, I bet. I mean, organization is key when you're dealing with that much data, I imagine.
Absolutely.
The guide also mentioned database management systems. What role do those play?
So that's where all that valuable data lives, where it's stored and organized. Think of it like a massive library, but instead of books, it's filled with information about insurance policies, claims, risk factors, that kind of thing.
So actuarial assistants need to be as comfortable with like querying databases as they are with, statistical formulas.
You got it. And we're seeing more and more programming languages like Python becoming super important in this role too.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredibly versatile. Like you can use it for things like automating repetitive tasks, or even creating like custom data visualizations.
Wow. So not only do you have to understand the math behind it all, you have to be able to wrangle the technology that helps you apply it.
Exactly. It's a lot.
That's quite the skill set.
It is. And it's why, that continuous learning that we talked about is so important in this field.
Yeah.
Because the technology, it just keeps evolving. And the most successful people in this field, they're adaptable. They're eager to learn new tools, new techniques. You can't be afraid to keep up.
So it's not one of those careers where you can just like rest on your laurels once you've learned the basics?
Nope, not at all.
Gotcha. It sounds like this career path would be a great fit for someone who loves solving puzzles,
Oh, definitely.
You're piecing together information from different sources, using those analytical skills to understand patterns, and then ultimately, like, predict what might happen in the future.
That's a great way to put it. It really is intellectually stimulating work.
Right.
It requires that strong foundation in technical concepts,
Right.
for sure,
Right.
but also a creative approach to problem solving. You got to think outside the box sometimes.
Now, before we get, like, too caught up in the technical side of things, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, communication.
Right.
Because in the guide, it really emphasized how important it is to be able to explain like these complex concepts to people who aren't, data experts. So why is that so crucial for an actuarial assistant?
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the numbers, right? It's about using those numbers to make decisions, like real-world decisions that impact people's lives. And to do that well, you need to be able to communicate your findings. And not just to other actuaries, but to people who, maybe don't have that same technical background.
So like you might be presenting your analysis to, I don't know, executives at your company or explaining like risk assessments to clients.
Exactly. Or even just helping colleagues in other departments understand what your findings actually mean.
Right. So you're really bridging the gap there between the world of data and the actual decisions that are being made.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like, I don't know, it's almost like being a storyteller in a way, but instead of words, you're using numbers and statistical models to get your point across.
I love that analogy. It really is about crafting a narrative.
Yeah.
One that resonates with your audience, using data to back up your points and make those recommendations crystal clear.
So for anyone listening who's maybe thinking, oh, I don't know, I'm not really a people person, I'm not a natural communicator, what advice would you give them?
Honestly, communication is a skill. And like any skill, you can learn it. You can practice and get better over time.
That's true.
There are tons of resources out there from, public speaking courses to online workshops, anything that can help you build that confidence and help you get better at, explaining complex things in a way that people actually understand.
Yeah, that's reassuring. So it's not like you have to be born with this like natural charisma to do this job well.
Exactly. And honestly, don't underestimate just the power of practice. The more you can explain your work to other people, friends, family, whoever,
Right.
even just talking through your thought process out loud, the easier it'll become.
Yeah. It's like anything else. Practice makes perfect, or at least, it makes you better.
Okay.
So let's talk about the actual career path for a minute. The guide mentioned that actuarial science, it's constantly evolving, which makes sense when you think about it. But for someone who's just starting out, what does that mean? Should they be prepared to, like, always be learning new things?
Absolutely. The reality is the actuarial landscape is always changing. New technologies pop up, regulations change, new risk factors emerge. It's ongoing. And the key to staying ahead of the game is to be a lifelong learner. It's that simple.
So it's not enough to just, like, get your certifications and call it a day.
Nope. Not at all. The best in this field, they're always looking for new information. They're going to industry conferences, taking online courses, really just, keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening.
It sounds like a career path that would definitely keep you on your toes, intellectually speaking.
100%. It's a dynamic field. It rewards curiosity, adaptability,
Hmm.
and you definitely got to have a passion for problem solving.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered a lot, from the ins and outs of analyzing data to the ethical considerations, which I thought was really interesting. But if you had to pick like one key takeaway that you hope our listeners walk away with, what would it be?
I think the biggest takeaway is that actuarial science, it's about so much more than just crunching numbers. It's about using those analytical skills to make a real difference, to
Hmm.
help people understand risk, manage risk, and to really shape the future of not just the insurance industry, but lots of industries.
I love that. Beautifully said. And for our listeners, if you want to explore this world a bit further, we'll be sure to link to all the resources we mentioned, including that awesome RoleCatcher career guide, in the show notes.
Yes, definitely check those out. There's a ton of great stuff in there.
And on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of actuarial assistance. I always learn so much from you.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
And to our listeners, until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.